Have you ever watched a parent communicating with a 9-year-old kid and it just really wasn't going well? As a matter of fact, it seemed that while the parent was talking, the kid was somehow deaf. He simply wasn't hearing. And the volume of the parent gets louder and louder, and the child is just seemingly oblivious until the parent is screaming, and finally the child pays attention. Well, obviously that's not the best way for parent-child communication to happen. I'm not here to talk about parenting skills today. I'm here to talk about what may well have happened with the child, and that is something that is called listener fatigue. It may well be that in the 9 years of hearing this parent's voice and hearing certain directions and certain tones, that the child came to realize that there are certain tones of voice that don't mean a whole lot. And so why should I pay attention? And it's kind of like the train that runs alongside Lane and Shelley's house. It's right across the highway, and you're not there many days, not there many hours actually, until you don't even notice the rumbling of the train as it comes by because you have kind of phased it out. I'm talking right now about listener fatigue, and as a preacher and a pastor, how to overcome listener fatigue. Well, I talked in our last Ministry Monday about the importance and the value of involving other people in your preaching. I specifically talked about using them to read verses of Scripture and the such. I have watched others in their preaching, and I've used this at times myself, where that someone had a testimony that was particularly relevant to what I was preaching or teaching, talking about, and I would bring that into my preaching at that particular moment because it fit. At times it may be a song, it could be any number of other things. It's important, if we're going to keep people where they are willing to listen to us, that we don't fall in love with the sound of our own voice and feel like that we are the only one who can communicate a message that has significance to the people sitting in front of us. Okay, the second thing, and I've touched on this briefly, is vary your topics. I have 20 topics that I try to preach on 2 times a year. Below, in what is called the show notes on YouTube, there is a link to a free download at our website. Go download those 20 topics and you'll see the benefit of it. Now, in our church, we approach it from the perspective of Sunday is for sinners. And with little variation in our worship and praise service on Sunday, it will be evangelistic. We have people who need God. They need the good news of the gospel every single service. So for me, these 20 topics are going to be dealt with during an adult Bible class, or they're going to be dealt with during a midweek service. Keeping a record of these 20 topics is beneficial because there are things that I like to preach about. There are things that I have a default setting that if I run across an idea. On the other hand, there are things, and you have these too, that you don't particularly enjoy preaching about. So when I am able to look at a log of what I preached about, have I spent so much time talking about living a righteous life, or have I spent so much time talking about forgiveness or encouragement that I have not taken the right amount of time to address worldliness or spiritual warfare or prayer or any of the other topics that need to be addressed. Go to seed on one topic. I have an acquaintance who preached so much end-time prophecy that the church went to seed on the future while they were ignoring the present. Another acquaintance was so determined that he was going to have a godly church that every text became an opportunity to preach about modesty. Another one, love to preach about praise and worship. Well, every single thing I have mentioned is beneficial, it's helpful, but it's important to diversify the message and the approach that we take to that message. At times recently, I've used basically what was a children's sermon to communicate my message. There have been other times when we have used some illusion. There have been occasions when someone sang a solo. Diversify. Use different approaches to communicate the message that you're trying to get across. I want to challenge you. This year, teach or preach a series on a topic, or expositionally work your way through a book of the Bible. Right now at Calvary, we are working our way through 1 Peter. Those 5 chapters are extremely applicable and relevant to the world right now because they deal with persecution and living in difficult times. What am I saying? I'm saying do something different. Try something you've never tried before. Combat listener fatigue. Help them to pay attention to what you're saying. Help them to want to pay attention to what you're saying. Find a way to overcome listener fatigue, and part of it is simply diversifying your message and dealing with topics that need to be dealt with on an ongoing and consistent basis. Don't go to seed on any one thing. See you next week. God bless you. Have a wonderful, wonderful week. Hey, and go download that 20 topics. It will be a benefit to some.